So let's revisit this same example we've done a million times now of calculating people's body mass index. So here we already have it as a struct. It's called study subjects. So we have a struct where the fields are name, height, weight, and pronoun. So this shows you another way, a really efficient, compact way of making a struct array if it's a small number of elements. You can use the struct function, and for each field, you put the list of all its values as a cell array. Right? So this is saying I'm going to make a struct array. It has a field called name, and the values of the name field are Jim, Joe, John, and so forth. Then you do the same thing with height, weight, and pronoun. But the important thing is it has to be a cell array. You can't just make it an ordinary numerical array. That won't do what you expect. So even though these are numbers, you still have to use a cell array when you're doing this. All right, so let's make this struct array. There you go. We've got names, heights, weights, and pronouns. Now let's use that information to do our BMI calculations and print out each person's weight classification. So here's the key skill, just how do you get information out of that? So we're going to have a loop where my loop counter is called K, and the struct array is called study subjects. Okay, so with a struct, the index goes first, then the dot, and then the field. So this says take out the name field from the kth element of that array. And then you do the same thing with all the others. Oops. Is it called height or heights? Just height, okay. Trying to make sure I'm doing this right because something didn't happen the way I was expecting it to. Well, let's see what happens. Okay, so that worked. All right, so we take out each field of each element of that struct array, so one at a time, and then just put it in a separate variable, and then the rest is the same as always. All right, so it calculates the BMI, determines the weight classification, and then prints out a message. But let's go a little further with it. Instead of just making BMI a separate array, let's make it another field of the struct. Right, so instead of making this BMI of K, let's make it study subjects of K dot BMI. Right, so instead of making a separate array, now we're going to put that number back in the struct as another field. And then I just have to make sure I change this everywhere I had it. All right, that should do it. All right, so that still works. But now you'll notice the struct has a BMI field as well with all those values there. Let's do the same thing with the classification. Let's make that a field of the struct too. Okay, so instead of classification of K, let's make it study subjects of K dot classification. All right, still works the same way, but now at the end, the struct array has another field, classification, with all of those strings in it. All right. Any question about any of that? It takes a little getting used to, but the one advice I'm going to give you, don't try to get too fancy. When we talked about ordinary arrays, I said it's always better to use array operations than loops. Only use a loop if you have to. With cell arrays and structs, use a loop because it's just really tricky to try to do it with array operations. I always struggle to figure it out myself, and I often revert to just using a loop. Okay, so for something like this, don't try to do, say, all these BMI calculations in one line. Just do a loop and add the field to one element at a time.